There are points in film history where the equipment didn't simply malfunction, it reacted. Moments when cameras behaved as if they were absorbing more than the director intended, when microphones captured vibrations from no identifiable source, and when strips of celluloid displayed distortions that followed no physical rule. These weren't the everyday inconveniences of a chaotic set. They were failures that appeared at precise, almost meaningful moments when a story edged toward the dangerous, the uncanny, or the unexplainable. Seasoned technicians, men and women who had spent decades surrounded by analog machinery, admitted the behavior didn't match any error they had encountered. Frames buckled with surreal gleams, exposure wavered in places where lighting hadn't changed, and density shifts emerged only on scenes dealing with themes the equipment shouldn't have been capable of understanding. Sometimes the film stock itself seemed to respond to the emotional force of the narrative, picking up strange overlays or ghost-like impressions that disappeared when retested. The audio realm carried its own disturbances. Faint tones crept into recordings, neither feedback nor radio contamination, but something patterned, something intentional. Low-frequency pulses rose and fell in ways that felt responsive to the actor's lines. At times, magnetic tape contradicted modern transfers, holding details that vanished the moment the reel left its original format. This episode collects 15 of the most compelling cases in which science fiction productions were shaped by interference no one could fully identify. Whether the origins lie in flawed circuitry, drifting electromagnetic fields, or an unseen presence that left fingerprints in the machinery, the traces remain etched into the surviving materials decades later. Step inside the vault. Thread the reel. Listen to the static, because sometimes the noise is trying to communicate. Star Wars: A New Hope, 1977. Even before its iconic release, Star Wars encountered technical anomalies. Film magazines jammed in desert scenes referencing the Force, light corridors dimmed in the Death Star when Vader entered, and optical printers added faint, unexpected halos around lightsabers. Boom, microphones captured low harmonic vibrations under cockpit dialogue, disappearing during retakes, yet reappearing on original reels. Lucas noted these occurrences but focused on workflow rather than speculation. The preserved footage shows subtle distortions that coincide precisely with narrative beats, invoking unseen power, suggesting the technology briefly reacted to the story it recorded. 2. Predator, 1987. The jungle location of Predator produced an eerie interaction between environment and technology. Infrared cameras exhibited false heat signatures when focused on the invisible creature, while Steadicams occasionally resisted motion, as though the equipment sensed the narrative's tension. Visual warps made the jungle appear to curve around actors and the unseen hunter. Audio engineers recorded fragments of dialogue from earlier takes embedded in new footage, creating the effect of displaced time. Ambient sounds would abruptly silence when the characters detected the predator, creating a strange, narrative-dependent stillness. All anomalies correlated with scenes emphasizing the alien's presence, leaving the impression that both cameras and microphones responded to unseen narrative forces, subtly echoing the creature's stealth. 3. Blade Runner 1982. On the neon-soaked streets of Blade Runner, monitors began revealing subtle anomalies during key sequences. Voigtkamp tests and reflective shots displayed ghostly afterimages on video assist screens, silhouettes trailing actors by fractions of a second. These phantoms appeared only on live monitors, never on the negatives themselves, creating the impression of an echo captured by the machinery rather than the lens. Audio tracks included faint, high-frequency hums underlying dialogue, aligning precisely with philosophical lines questioning humanity and memory. These tones disappeared in isolated tests but returned during full takes, as if the film's thematic tension influenced the equipment. Lighting also reacted unpredictably. In the Bradbury Building, exposure meters shifted slightly when characters explored moral and artificial boundaries. Technicians confirmed power stability, suggesting that the film itself responded to moments of narrative significance. Today, archival review shows these anomalies clustering around sequences exploring human versus replicant, reinforcing the sense that the production captured more than intended, a subtle resonance of the film's central question. 4. The Terminator, 1984. During the Terminator's night sequences, city streetlights flickered in cascading patterns whenever the Terminator appeared on camera, though grid systems were stable. Cameras unexpectedly accelerated, producing slow-motion effects in pursuit scenes despite no operator adjustments. Microphones captured metallic hums in empty streets, sounds with no physical source, Horizontal streaks appeared on film frames moments before the Terminator entered view. Cameron dismissed them publicly, but crew notes indicate the glitches occurred precisely at narrative beats tied to the machine's relentless progression. The anomalies felt thematic, as if the film itself recognized the plot. 5. Alien 1979. On board the Nostromo, disturbances appeared at precise narrative points. Monitors displayed erratic alphanumeric patterns during scenes involving the xenomorph, while airflow and temperature sensors registered false spikes in ventilation shafts. When the camera tracked the creature, visual artifacts appeared slight ripples in the frame, not caused by lenses or operator motion. Audio captured faint, guttural vibrations where no machinery existed. The anomalies resolved outside these narrative moments. Scott noted the patterns, but took a pragmatic approach. Still, the anomalies' alignment with the alien's presence suggested the interference mirrored the film's own subject, an unseen predator manipulating its environment. The final reels preserve these subtle traces, faint but unmistakable echoes of something beyond standard filmmaking. 6. The Thing, 1982. The frozen isolation of the Antarctic set seemed to influence both crew and equipment during The Thing. Cameras stalled without explanation, light meters flickered inconsistently, and instruments reacted only during sequences featuring the creature's transformative powers. The malfunctions appeared timed to narrative tension, particularly when characters confronted the threat's shape-shifting nature. A particularly troubling episode occurred during the blood test scene. Shutters shifted slightly off rhythm, creating a jitter that ruined the take. Repeating the scene under identical conditions yielded the same anomaly, yet the cameras functioned perfectly in other shots. The interference appeared tied to the story beat itself. Sound crews detected low, irregular thumps beneath dialogue, resembling a heartbeat out of sync with any actor or machine. The rhythm intensified when paranoia dominated the scene, then dissipated during quieter moments. Even seasoned technicians were left without explanation. The cold and metallic surroundings could not account for the consistency of these anomalies. Carpenter himself remarked that the set possessed a kind of resistance, a subtle pushback against documentation. The resulting footage contains faint traces, distortions that seem less like mechanical failure and more like the lingering presence of the film's unseen menace. 7. 2001. A Space Odyssey, 1968. Kubrick's 2001 was renowned for meticulous technical precision, yet the production recorded peculiar malfunctions that defied explanation. On the rotating centrifuge set, gyroscopic sensors occasionally misread the set's position, displaying tilt and vibration when the structure was stationary. These readings occurred exclusively during sequences involving Hal's oversight, and disappeared when filming returned to neutral scenes. Visual oddities appeared in the Dawn of Man sequences. Silhouettes flickered briefly ahead of the actor's movement. Despite precise rear projection alignment, they vanished in later takes, leaving no physical trace, yet persisted on the reels. Sound engineers noticed recurring clicks around Hal's dialogue, as if unseen switches activated in tandem with the artificial intelligence's decisions. The noises were absent from any machinery, appearing only in pre- and post-roll audio segments. Miniature spacecraft models also experienced motion control stalls that coincided with Hal's script-driven decisions. Diagnostics found no mechanical issues. The stalls only occurred during these thematic beats. Crew recollections describe a feeling of unease, as if the film itself had awareness. Archived footage exhibits subtle, symbolic distortions aligned with Hal's presence, hinting that the machinery briefly mirrored the narrative's tension and intelligence. 8. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977. The making of Close Encounters presented unusual phenomena tightly bound to the story's depiction of extraterrestrial contact. Lighting rigs designed to mimic UFO brilliance sometimes surged beyond their programmed output during critical sequences, though power lines and circuits remained stable. The surges occurred precisely in scenes showing the aliens' arrival, disappearing when the story returned to mundane human activity. Cinematographers faced unexplainable visual effects. Long exposures intended to create glows and halos produced arcs and streaks that did not correspond to any object or light source on set. Laboratory examination confirmed the footage was correctly exposed, yet these arcs persisted in a way that suggested some influence beyond standard optical physics. Audio recorded subtle harmonics underlying the iconic five-tone motif. These were too patterned to be random noise, appearing only in moments of alien communication. Internal memos note that ordinary scenes filmed without contact did not produce such anomalies, reinforcing the sense of alignment between story and interference. Spielberg joked the equipment had its own dramatic sense, but crew consensus implied a deeper pattern. Disruptions were concentrated where humans and unknown forces converged, suggesting that the anomalies were more than coincidence, echoing the thematic tension of the film itself. 9. Poltergeist 1982. The disturbances on the set of Poltergeist seemed to merge with the film's supernatural subject. Motion control rigs misfired, sometimes executing commands that hadn't been programmed, leaving props and cameras out of sync. Technicians combed through wiring, inspected circuits, and verified every control, but all readings were normal. The anomalies only appeared during scenes in which the family interacted with the otherworldly presence, as if the machines themselves responded to the narrative tension. Sound recording was equally confounding. Faint whispers emerged from the boom microphones during specific takes, faintly patterned yet intangible. Playback on digital systems erased the sounds, while analog equipment preserved them. The phenomena occurred exclusively during the narrative's exploration of unseen forces. Even the film stock revealed unexpected quirks. Certain frames showed tiny, luminous points forming delicate patterns reminiscent of constellations. Laboratory analysis ruled out chemical errors, scratches, or dust. The anomalies persisted, perfectly aligned with moments of heightened paranormal activity. While Tobe Hooper publicly shrugged off the technical quirks, crew notes indicate an awareness of something unusual. Lights would dim without cause, temperature around racks would shift briefly, and the effects appeared only when tension peaked. The reels themselves seemed to preserve these traces, subtle yet deliberate, suggesting an unseen hand in the production. 10. The Abyss 1989. The Abyss's underwater sequences brought unexpected technical challenges. Within the massive tank, lights appeared to drift independently, forming trails that moved with fluid, lifelike motion. Divers and operators could find no physical cause. The lights followed patterns seemingly alive, reacting to characters and narrative beats rather than mechanical controls. Pressure and depth sensors on cameras oscillated irregularly during scenes involving the alien pseudopod, yet readings were normal in other sequences. Audio captured a low-frequency hum during these moments, absent when re-recorded in other conditions, creating a sense of unseen machinery interacting with the story itself. Several reels developed subtle wave-like patterns across the emulsion, which lab technicians could not reproduce under controlled conditions. Interestingly, these anomalies appeared only in shots depicting communication with the unknown intelligence, leaving archival footage imbued with unexplained visual and acoustic artifacts. James Cameron proceeded with filming despite these occurrences, yet the patterns were undeniable. The disturbances seemed to respond directly to story elements, blurring the boundary between the narrative of first contact and the physical capture of that narrative on film. 11. The Fly 1986. In The Fly, the grotesque transformation of Seth Brundle bled into the machinery intended to capture it. As the mutation intensified, lighting fixtures would subtly dim and fluctuate, creating shifts that could not be attributed to power, failure, or environmental conditions. The effect appeared precisely during scenes showcasing physical deterioration, and technicians could not reproduce it during controlled tests. Cameras exhibited unusual behavior. Focus drifted even when locked, and the resulting softness in key shots conveyed an almost organic recoil, as if the frame resisted capturing the mutation. Multiple reshoots under identical lighting failed to eliminate the anomaly, reinforcing the impression that the interference was narrative-dependent. Sound recordings added an extra layer of unease. Microphones picked up faint, insect-like hums or vibrations that could not be traced to props, fans, or environmental sources. The effect emerged solely during mutation sequences, never in unrelated scenes. Film stock itself exhibited subtle, creeping-edge distortions, akin to a touch moving across the emulsion. Lab technicians could not link the pattern to heat, humidity, or mishandling. David Cronenberg later remarked that the production seemed to mutate alongside its protagonist, suggesting the anomalies reflected the story as much as they affected it. 12. Westworld 1973. Westworld's production, heralded for its early digital vision, faced disruptions that seemed almost sentient. Scenes featuring the android's malfunctions consistently triggered unexpected glitches in the pioneering electronic sensors used to capture point-of-view shot. Pixel clusters would drift in odd directions, producing jagged, erratic imagery that no operator error or diagnostic failure could explain. These anomalies appeared exclusively during moments when the narrative emphasized autonomy or rebellion, vanishing once the story returned to conventional dialogue. The audio team experienced equally bizarre patterns. In moments of stillness, the microphones recorded faint, rhythmic pulses that seemed to respond to the actor's movements. Engineers could detect no source, and playback tests on alternative equipment erased the signal, yet it reappeared each time the scene was filmed. The rhythm was subtle but unnerving, hinting at a responsiveness beyond mechanical causality. Post-filming review revealed other anomalies. Reels featuring the gunslinger character developed minuscule exposure variations whenever he entered frame, though all settings were manually controlled and precisely calibrated. Lab inspections confirmed the negatives were chemically and mechanically flawless, leaving only the suggestion that the equipment itself reacted to the narrative. Michael Crichton, pragmatic and meticulous, dismissed supernatural explanations. Still, the recurring disturbances hinted at a deeper relationship between story and apparatus, as if the film's depiction of artificial intelligence had temporarily influenced the devices capturing it. 13. The Andromeda Strain, 1971. Though the Andromeda Strain was built on rigorous scientific detail, its production was marked by anomalies no lab technician could neatly categorize. The film's multi-monitor system, state-of-the-art for its era, developed inexplicable flicker patterns that appeared only during scenes involving alien contamination. The flicker didn't follow any electrical cycle or grounding flaw. Instead, the screens blinked in synchronized rhythms that resembled coded signals, vanishing the moment technical staff attempted to document them. The sterilized Wildfire laboratory set added more unease. Cameras occasionally recorded drifting, translucent forms inside the clean rooms, shapes without clear structure, sliding across the frame for a fraction of a second. These weren't reflections or lens flares. The anomalies appeared specifically on duplicated reels, not on the original negative, an inversion that baffled the laboratories responsible for processing the footage. Audio disturbances surfaced during dialogue, referencing mutation or unknown pathogens. Sharp bursts of high-frequency tones, narrow, metallic, unmistakably patterned cut through the recordings. The tones aligned only with scenes discussing the extraterrestrial organism, lending the impression of a signal responding from within the narrative itself. Director Robert Wise rarely acknowledged the issues, but years later he admitted that the production carried an unsettling consistency. Archivists studying the surviving reels agree, the interference feels intentional, almost thematic, as if the film's fictional organism left a trace of itself in the equipment used to portray it. 14. Stalker, 1979. The production of Stalker unfolded within abandoned factories, flooded rooms, and desolate landscapes locations that already carried an unsettling aura. But the technical disturbances that followed the crew gave the impression that the zone itself resisted being documented. Entire stretches of footage returned from the lab tinted with a greenish cast that didn't match any lighting setup, as if the emulsion had absorbed an environmental mood rather than a photographic error. The tint appeared only in shots tied to the film's most ambiguous, metaphysical moments. Focus issues plagued the camera crew as well. Even when lenses were manually locked, some compositions softened at precise angles, blurring in a way that felt almost organic. Multiple reshoots under identical conditions produced the same distortion. Whatever caused the aberration didn't behave like a mechanical defect, it behaved like a choice. Sound recording proved no less mysterious. In the quiet of derelict tunnels and industrial chambers, the microphones captured low-frequency hums, resembling distant turbines, though no machinery operated anywhere nearby. Strangely, these tones didn't appear during on-set monitoring, only after the magnetic tape was played back in the studio. Attempts to replicate the sounds met with nothing but silence. Years later, archivists found that certain negatives carried faint textural irregularities, barely perceptible patterns that didn't match any known form of film decay. They appear exactly where the narrative touches on the unknowable boundaries of the zone. Stalker has long carried an air of the uncanny, but its lingering technical anomalies suggest that something within the film's world pressed back against the devices meant to capture it. 15. Solaris, 1972. During the making of Solaris, the production team encountered a series of disturbances that felt strangely linked to the film's central mystery. Whenever scenes involving the sentient ocean were filmed, the developed reels revealed faint, wave-like pulses gliding across the image, thin bands of brightness that appeared nowhere else. These weren't scratches, light leaks, or chemical errors. They behaved almost like a visual heartbeat, responding to the emotional intensity of the scene rather than any physical stimulus inside the studio. The sound department grappled with an equally baffling pattern. On several recordings, low, drifting tones bled into dialogue tones that didn't match HVAC rumble, camera noise, or environmental hum. The frequencies seemed to fluctuate with the rhythm of the actor's lines, creating an impression of something listening, then answering in its own indecipherable language. But when technicians tried to isolate the anomaly, it vanished, only to re-emerge on the original reels. A particularly unsettling moment occurred deep into production. A camera's internal meter began rising and falling in a darkened room with the lens cap firmly attached. No stray light, no reflective surfaces, no external cause. The readings pulsed softly, almost like a response. Tarkovsky discouraged the crew from speculating, but his expression convinced many that he sensed a kind of intelligence behind the interference. Today, archivists examining the preserved negatives remark on subtle density shifts found only in scenes tied to the ocean's presence. Whether caused by unstable equipment or something more enigmatic, the anomalies give the impression that Solaris wasn't merely photographed, it was interacting with the machinery capturing it. Bonus: The Twilight Zone. Nightmare at 20,000 feet, 1963. Few productions carry as eerie a legacy as this episode of The Twilight Zone. The story centers on a passenger who perceives a creature on the airplane wing, and the production itself seemed to mirror this unseen presence. The cabin windows inexplicably fogged from the inside during shooting of the creature sequences, forming hand-like smears that reappeared even after cleaning. These incidents happened only when the creature was in frame, suggesting a strange interaction with the set. Lighting technicians recorded subtle exposure variations during the storm effects, synchronized with William Shatner's gaze toward the wing. Frame-by-frame analysis revealed faint bands of grain that could not be attributed to camera or chemical processing errors. Audio anomalies compounded the disturbance. Boom microphones captured low-frequency rumbles absent from the environment, only audible during the creature's appearances. Playback inconsistencies made the sound seem to exist between reels, emerging and disappearing in a manner impossible to trace. Crew memos noted that the anomalies only appeared when the narrative depicted what no one else could see. While Matheson joked about a gremlin interfering with production, archivists studying surviving negatives decades later confirmed subtle, persistent traces, tiny tremors in exposure, and barely perceptible warps in the image. This episode is a rare instance where fiction and technical anomaly intertwined, leaving a tangible residue of tension captured on tape, a haunting echo that persists beyond the story itself. Throughout these productions, a clear pattern emerges. The anomalies were not random accidents. They appeared precisely when the story ventured into the unknown, then dissipated when the narrative returned to ordinary circumstances. Whether caused by unstable machinery, stray electromagnetic fields, or an unseen influence operating between frames, the traces remain, preserved on the reels and in the memory of those who filmed them. Now, the question belongs to you. Were these occurrences the quirks of equipment pushed to its limits, or fleeting glimpses of forces beyond comprehension? When cameras fail at the exact moments a story brushes against the extraordinary, coincidence becomes difficult to accept. Which explanation seems plausible, and which one chills you with the possibility of truth?